BART riders.
Hey, San Francisco, I'm Ben Kaplan, and this is the podcast where we define who we are and who we want to be.
We are diverse.
We are innovative.
We are inclusive.
We are change makers.
Problem solvers.
Activists.
Leaders.
Citizens.
We are open-minded.
Optimistic.
There's hope for a better tomorrow. And you gotta give them hope.
This is the podcast that's more than a podcast.
San Francisco, they are the world champion.
We are San Francisco. Hey, San Francisco. Today, I'm chatting with Ahsha Safai. He's a current member of the Board of Supervisors representing District 11, and also a candidate for mayor of San Francisco. Ahsha, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell me about how you got your start in city government. My understanding is your political story kind of starts out, you moved to Boston when you were 5, originally born in Iran. You went to Northeastern University. You did your master's in city planning at MIT. And I think when we've chatted before, you said that you always had this sense, maybe a dream, that you would like to be a mayor of a city someday, that might be in your future. Where does that come from? How did you begin?
Well, before I get into that, I think it's important to say how I got to where I am right now.
Okay.
A little bit, you touched on it a little bit. You know, I'm one of the only candidates, I am the only candidate, but I'm one of the only people on the board that's an immigrant to this country. I think there's 2 others, but I was born in Iran, as you said, born to Iranian dad and American mom. And a lot of what we're seeing in the Middle East right now, in that part of the world, is how my life began. Religious extremists came into power, kind of tore the country apart. It was no longer safe for my mom being an American.
Which is how you end up in the U.S.
Exactly. And so we left, went to Cambridge and Boston. As you said, I went to Northeastern, had the great opportunity of learning from Governor Michael Dukakis, who was a professor of mine. I studied African-American studies and political science. Went on to work for a civil rights math literacy organization called the Algebra Project.
And did you have a sense, you were obviously in city planning in graduate school in MIT, so you had an interest, but did you have a sense that you would, 2024, be sitting here right now running for mayor?
Well, I wrote in my essay, my entrance essay, that I wanted to be to MIT, that I wanted to be a mayor of a city one day. When I came out here after I met my wife, Yadira, I fell in love with San Francisco, and I knew I wanted to be mayor of this city one day, immediately. And so I've been working on it for the last 25 years. I started under Mayor Willie Brown, worked for Mayor Gavin Newsom as a deputy department head. In fact, what you're seeing out on the streets today, because of this crazy weather, I worked for that department. I was out on the streets cleaning and greening San Francisco in these types of crises with public works, putting young people to work, formerly incarcerated, formerly homeless, giving them opportunities. And then I started my own small business. And this backdrop is perfect because I help small businesses. I help people through the planning process, small builders, developers, but I also work for the janitors union.
And then things really pick up your elected political career. In 2008, you run for the Board of Supervisors, hard fought race. You don't win that race, but what did you learn from that first experience? You got to start somewhere. What did that teach you?
It taught me that I did not know how important the history of labor was to this city. I didn't have as strong relationships in Chinatown. I didn't have a complete exposure to all the elements I think are important to be successful in San Francisco politics.
You just didn't have the context for all the things.
I didn't have the
because
context. I didn't have the relationships.
Yeah.
So I had been here, at that time I had been here for about 8 years, but I did not have as much exposure. So it was extremely important. It allowed me to start my family, have my daughter, my son. So I'm a proud father. And I think that's super important because it gives you a different perspective of how you're approaching the city, thinking about it through the lens of working families and families in general. And
trying to entertain.
How hard it is to survive in this city.
Well, I have a 3-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. So it's my weekends are now shifted to how do we entertain toddlers that have a short attention span? And so we explore the city to do it. Yeah.
And actually, that's part of how I started to get really involved in the neighborhood because a lot of our neighborhood parks were run down. And a lot of the families were like, wait, I'm stretching myself. I'm trying to survive in the city. And then I go down the corner and to the corner playground, it's falling apart. That's not fair. So we organized and got my former boss, the mayor, Gavin Newsom, to put in the bond and prioritize our neighborhood. And that became kind of a catalyst for me for running the second time around.
And really that sort of 8-year gap between 2008, 2016, that's when, as you alluded to, you were working for Service Employees International Union, Local 87. You were their political director. And what did that process teach you? Obviously to help with the relationships you need, but what did you learn from that for 2016?
I will tell you, not even for 2016. A lot of people don't realize, yes, San Francisco has been the gold rush and it's been the financial center of the West. And we have a lot of venture capitalists start businesses and creativity and ingenuity. But a lot of what is missed is the importance of bringing labor and business together. And when San Francisco is at its best, and again, it's just phenomenal that you have this backdrop of the city. When San Francisco is at its best, it's when everyone is prospering, when everyone is advancing, and when labor and business come together. So when I work with the janitors, we worked on the mid-market tax break. We worked on the Twitter tax break because when those office buildings are full, janitors are working, security guards are working, small businesses around there, everyone is benefiting from that. Now, there's some things that could be adjusted. There were some mistakes that were made.
We'll get to it because I want to talk about the labor negotiation coming up this summer. But this idea that sometimes it's pitted that San Francisco is kind of a zero-sum game. Someone wins, someone loses.
Exactly.
And it might not have to be like that, right?
Yeah.
Actually, at its best, it's like everyone wins, not like there's winners and losers and the mayor or the board is going to pick who are winners and losers. It shouldn't work like that.
It should not work like that. It doesn't have to work like that. And as I said, when San Francisco is at its best, a lot of these large buildings that you see in the background, you have building trades, you have collective bargaining agreements negotiated, you have building trades members putting to work good middle-class jobs, good salaries. They're building housing. Let's make sure there's housing for working families and market rate. That beautiful bridge, the Bay Bridge, the steel workers, so many different people, engineers, others. There's enough ingenuity and wealth colliding in San Francisco that everyone can prosper. It doesn't need to be a zero-sum game. And that's what I think many, many elected officials miss, and people that want to be involved in the political environment in San Francisco miss. They come in, they say, wait, I have this great idea. We can do X. It can cost less. It can do that. But then they don't think about, what does cost less mean? What does faster mean? It doesn't mean that I don't want faster and I don't want it to be less expensive, because I do, but I also have to consider who's involved, what are the inputs going into that, and how everyone's prospering.
And I think one of the aspects of this, it's not that labor is like, oh, we need to sacrifice what we're doing for the city because we need to take care of labor. I mean, there are people here who do fantastic work, great work. Absolutely. And if we can get the best work done and support our community and our workers.
Absolutely. I agree with that 1,000%. And I do think it's one of the shortcomings of this administration. I started under Willie Brown. I learned about management, leadership, and accountability from Mayor Brown. I learned about big ideas from Gavin Newsom. I learned about endurance and building coalitions from Mayor Ed Lee. This mayor has no one on her team that understands how labor and business come together. And so many of the shortcomings of this administration are because of that. Now, you can propose ideas that are going to be business friendly, but they also can have an element to them that are going to marry labor and business together. There can be ideas about facilitating and streamlining, but let's get everyone to the table. Let's ensure that everyone's involved in the conversation. And so many of the times, London Breed has not been interested in that. And if you're going to assume the mayorship, whoever the new mayor be, and I believe it will be me, you have to come in with that level of experience. You have to know how all the elements come together. And that, I think, is going to be the defining characteristic of who becomes the next mayor. And that's why I think I'm the most qualified person for the job.
It seems like some have called it a knife fight in a phone booth. Mm-hmm. And you've heard that before. And it's just like, if you want to do something to maybe make change or run for office, you're kind of setting yourself up to be attacked. And I sometimes wonder about, what is the cost on family? So what is her perspective on this? Did she know she was signing up for this? What about her kids? Are they old enough to kind of get what's going on?
I'll tell you, you talk about being attacked, whether it was a joke or not. A prominent tech executive, Gary Tan, puts out a tweet that says, calling for the death, basically, I'm not going to I don't know, it's on the air, but whatever.
Okay,
Die slow, right?
I can, yeah, it's like basically the speech was he kind of mentioned you and a number of other supervisors. It was rap lyrics he was quoting that was a little bit have a violent type of lyric.
Basically calling for our death. And then, and this is what I knew immediately. I knew with as many followers as he has, I knew immediately someone would take on to that. And so that happened. And then someone takes his tweet, makes a flyer for themselves and said, Gary Tam's right. I wish a slow death to you and your loved ones. So I have to have then at that point, because of the position I'm in, because of the history of this city, because of the murder of Harvey Milk, George
Mayor
Moscone, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the police then have to give extra attention to the house. My kids see hey, Daddy, why are the police passing by and stopping at our house? Why are you running out to the mailbox every 5 seconds? Because I don't want them to see the flyer that I know 6 of my other colleagues have gotten at their house. So, and then he backs it. Oh, it was a joke. I was quoting Tupac, whatever. But the thing is, you can't joke like that in this city. It's not funny, and it can inspire or ignite or incite people to do harm. And those are one of the things that you don't think about when you run to be an elected official. I'm sure it's like
you're not going to one day think about your family's safety at your house.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a serious thing. And so it does take its toll on family. I mean, I think that there's a lot of positive benefits. I think the kids are proud. I think they like the idea. They're a lot more politically aware.
You got some door knockers this time? Yeah, some. You got a little bit of staff. Yeah,
they're aware, of what's going on. But I think we try to just let them go about their life and have their normal as life as possible.
Well, and in 2017, there was kind of a backlash or a brouhaha over you were developing the family. I got some land to, I guess, build a new house or a couple of houses for you and your extended family in your district. And people kind of got up in arms about that. And I guess sort of, hey, there's a conflict of interest here because you're the supervisor for this. What was your perspective on it? Were you kind of annoyed by that and just said like, hey, we're just trying to live our family life and you're making this a political thing?
Well, I mean, I think that it's it shows, listen, I went in eyes wide open. I've built in the city before. I built always on empty land, right? So the idea was my mother's moving here from the East Coast. We want to have space. The house that we're in was not designed well enough for us. So we're saying, we're going to build something for our family. And the way it is in a lot of neighborhoods in San Francisco, you have a lot of, NIMBYs come out and say, well, no, this is not right.
So we call it discretionary review. Anyone can sort of hold up a process, right? And we didn't expect that. Did you know that was coming when you did this?
No, I really and truly didn't think anyone would, make it that. Particularly because it's like, hey, I'm not trying to hide anything. I live down the street. This was literally a block from my house. So we said, you know what? We're just going to pause. And we found another house and we renovated that and we added an ADU and that's where we live now. And so we just moved from one side of the neighborhood to another. But it was unfortunate. I think people understand what they can do to kind of whip up fear and concern and make people upset. But these are 2 empty lots that are going to be built into housing at some point one day. So anyway.
Since becoming supervisor 2016, I know you've mentioned to me before that was like the door knocking campaign, right? How many doors did you knock on that?
I mean, it was at least 7,000, at least. I mean, at least I went through like 2 or 3 pairs of shoes. Okay. There's 48 precincts in the district, or there was at the time. And we knocked all of them and then went back to target another 12 to 15 that we needed to do more that I didn't get as much out of. And I'll tell you, I still bump into people that remember when I knocked on their door from 2008, that have my sign from 2008, like, oh yeah, you came to our house. And I'm like, oh my God, wow. So it really makes an impression. I think it makes a big difference. And
how's running for mayor different? More doors to knock on, maybe harder to get to. Is it a different, what have you learned from this campaign so far?
People don't really knock on doors for mayor. People don't do that because it's so vast. It's so widespread. But we might do that. I mean, it's one of the things I enjoy. And I think it's an important part of connecting with the average voter. And so we probably will have a piece of that we're going to roll out soon, because I think it's important to be present in all different neighborhoods. I think it's important for people to see you. And as I said, people remember that back from 2008.
And also there's a sense
But you can't door knock your way to City Hall.
Okay.
You can door knock your way to a Board of Supervisors seat because it's small enough.
Right,
but imagine like 50 times 11, you're talking about 500 precincts. It would take you a few years to door knock your way to City Hall.
Well, and did you consider, given that, you have this back at MIT, you said, I'm going to be mayor of a major US city one day. Did you think about it in 2018 after the death of Ed Lee, 2019 after the special election? You were still new, but you were on the board. Did you consider it back then?
No, you know what? I mean, for me, I always felt like when the opportunity is right, it will present itself to me. And that's kind of how politics is. Politics is really about the opportunity that you've kind of built toward. I think some people try to force it.
So you felt like you were a little bit green, a little bit forcing it back then, but now
I definitely feel like it would have been very difficult to try to run for mayor after being on the board for 2 years. It's really hard to make the case that you've put in the time, at least for me, from my perspective. I've been the president of the retirement fund now, $33 billion fund. I've been on the budget committee 3 out of the last 4 years. I passed major pieces of legislation. I have a better understanding how all the elements and pieces of local government work together. And I think that's really what differentiates me from the other candidates in the race. Learning from Mayor Brown, working under Mayor Newsom, working for Ed Lee, running my own small business, being in the labor movement for a decade, and then now being on the board for 7 years. This is a type of city, and in this moment, because of the crisis we're in and coming out of, you need someone that's ready for the job day one. There's no learning on the job. Like there's no opportunity with 30 to 40 million square feet of empty office space, with an economy that's very, very uneven. And then you have to have the ability to bring all the different groups together. You have to have someone that can build consensus.
Hi, I'm Ben Kaplan, a passionate advocate for City College of San Francisco, and I'm running for the Board of Trustees. Our college is key to solving our city's toughest challenges, from creating essential worker pipelines to achieving financial security and reigniting enrollments. But we need your help. Donate now to support free tuition and transform City College into a model of educational opportunity. Join us in making a difference. Visit votebenkaplan.com to find out more. Now back to the show.
And I know you've said this is the moment, and it sort of seems all of those experiences have come together for you. There is sort of, when you see the moment in San Francisco, or heck, it's probably talking points from other campaigns, saying that, hey, we need an outsider who's not in all of that. That's a liability, not a benefit, just because of the fact that, hey, the folks who broke it can't be counted on to fix it. And obviously you've been part of the Board of Supervisors. Mayor's very unpopular, but the board is also generally unpopular as well right now. So what is your response to that sort of argument that, yes, experience matters, but for right now, we actually need a fresh perspective?
I would say that when you're talking about a city that's come out of COVID, right? When you're coming out of we've never, ever had a situation that we have in our downtown right now. We've never had a situation where we have 30 to 40 million square feet. That is a major piece of why, the main driver of why we have an $800 million deficit and growing. It will probably surpass $1 billion. You have 28 labor contracts up for negotiation.
This summer,
which will probably be a placeholder because there's not enough money for them to really negotiate a final package. So I'm assuming that there's going to be, a lot of strife with the labor negotiations. Then you have the crisis on the streets of homelessness and crime. And so the idea of having a fresh perspective would be one thing if you're bringing someone to the table that has significant experience dealing with all these elements. I don't think we have that candidate in the race. The other thing is we are a strong mayor city. So yes, I've been on the board. I've been working on things that deal with homelessness and crime.
And just for anyone who doesn't understand what you just said, I mean, I think there's two types of ways cities are organized. And we have a lot of people who are kind of new to understanding San Francisco politics. You're saying that there's somewhere a lot of power resides in the mayor. They're basically the CEO of the city as well. And there's other cities where there's actually a city administrator or someone who does that function, and the mayor doesn't do that. We're the former, not the latter.
I'll give you two real concrete examples. So San Jose has an elected mayor, but a lot of the final decision making on implementing policy and moving departmental money and departmental decisions rests with the city administrator. So you don't have a strong mayor in San Jose. We had that model here up until 96, but we had charter reform. So we shifted 90% of the power to the mayor, okay? Despite what this mayor says about, oh, my hands are tied and I wish I had this, the mayor has the power. This mayor in our charter is the strongest mayor city in the United States, has the power to hire and fire department heads, has the power to appoint every single majority commission in the city, which is our oversight body and policy bodies, governing bodies. And finally, has the power to decide how money is spent. So we can try to allocate money through legislation or supplemental budget requests. The mayor has absolute authority deciding whether the money gets spent or not. Those three things set this mayor apart. So when I say, it's kind of like put me in, coach.
Yeah, you're on the bench. You want to go there? Okay,
I'm ready.
I'd say, okay.
Put me in, right? I'm Brock Purdy, right? I mean,
okay.
I wasn't.
You were not the top draft pick. You were low on the draft pick, but now you're proving yourself.
But I've proven myself. I'm ready to take the reins and give me the opportunity. And that's how it's always been. People have always underestimated me, and I fought for everything I had. You know, being an immigrant, raised by a single mom, like you fight for what you have. And I'll tell you right now, San Francisco needs someone that's ready to come in and fight, and also someone that can build consensus. And I have a proven track record of doing that. When we wanted to bring oversight and accountability to the Department of Homelessness, Supportive Housing, I got every single one of my colleagues on board. I got stakeholders on board. We went out and raised money. We put it on the ballot. First time to bring departmental oversight and mandatory audits. The only one that was against it was the mayor, because she said, oh, it's taking away some of my power and authority. 68% of the voters agreed. And guess what? We did our first audit last spring. They had to call in the FBI because the group they audited was selling vouchers to friends and family. We now can tell you with certainty, because of the metrics that we forced onto the department, that there's over 500 tent encampments around the city. We now are forcing them, the department with accountability, to ensure that these over 1,000 empty supportive housing units, same day referrals. All of that had to do with the work that we started. But again, I don't have the final decision making. I can't direct departments to do that work. It's actually forbidden in the charter. And so that's why I say that's kind of the distinction. San Francisco has never elected an outsider. They've never put someone in office, into the mayor's office, that doesn't have experience. And I think if you were thinking about it from a company's perspective, you want to bring someone to the table. If you were hiring a CEO, you want to bring someone that understands the organization or has experience in another organization. When you're dealing with something this large, $14.6 billion budget, multiple decision makers, stakeholders that now need to be kind of corralled and kind of put back on track.
I think one thing that sometimes some people miss, and I think because we become so polarized, especially on the Board of Supervisors, is that everyone says like we're trying to get to that like sixth vote, right? 11 members of the board, that's 6-5. Let's jam it in. But sometimes when you say it's better to get, even if you could get 6-5, get it through, it would be better to get consensus, better to get everyone on board, because then, the vote is not the end of it. The vote is just the beginning of, now we got to implement it. And if everyone's pulling in the same direction, we're better off.
You know what, Ben? I'm glad you said that. When I was first elected in 2017, it had been 15 years since they updated the inclusionary housing rules. Inclusionary housing is when a private developer builds housing, there's a percentage that they have to set aside below market.
Low income housing, yes.
So the number in 2018 was 12%. Hadn't been updated in 15 years. Maybe on some projects that were larger, it was 15. But the economy was gangbusters in 2017, right? At the time, many people's perspective, swung the board 6-5, right? I made a declarative statement to Supervisor Peskin at the time, Supervisor Kim, and all the other people. London Breed was on the board. I said, we're not going to do a 6-5 vote. We are going to do an 11-0 vote on this because it's too important. We need to build consensus. So Jane Kim and Aaron Peskin had a piece of legislation that they were moving. They were trying to get it done prior to the election. It didn't happen. Then I got on the board and worked with Katie Tang and London Breed at the time. But Aaron Peskin and I led the negotiations. We brought labor, we brought builders, we brought the technical advisory committee from the controller's office. We got everyone to the table and we negotiated a final deal. And to your point, if we had gone 6-5, there was a group out there that said, we're going to go straight to the ballot. We're going to bring it to the voters and we're going to put a really high, because everyone was like, oh yeah, 25%. That makes sense. They don't care about the economics. They love the way it sounds. But we stopped that from happening. We kept that gentleman away from going forward with that. And we got an 11-0 vote. And we all shared in the, I don't want to say the glory, but the success of passing that measure. And it's how things have to be done. And what's happened under London and this mayor is they've chosen issues that have divided and continue to divide. She's never put in the work to bring and build consensus. And I can't emphasize enough, that is the missing element with what's wrong with this city right now.
Well, I also feel like as I've learned more about the inner workings and having people on this show, your colleagues on the board, I've been surprised that it's like certain staffs don't talk to each other. And even people that are very political people in the city said, 20 years ago, you could have like a vigorous debate and then go have like dinner and drinks. And,
right.
and well, we all are coming from the same place. We want the best. We disagree on this, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. I sort of feel like this is me as an outsider looking in. It sort of feels more like, no, the other side, they're all bad people.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to talk or associate with them, which gets it hard to build consensus. Like, why has it become that?
I think you have some outside, I'm sorry to say this, but I think you have some outside stakeholders, people trying to influence the conversation that have really fomented this division. And the mayor being the executive of the city and being the leader of the city. And by the way, there was 11 other leaders too, right? We're leaders in our own way. But being the main voice of the city has bought into that. And if you listen to her messaging over the last 4 or 5 years, it's the district attorney's fault why we have crime and not prosecution. It's the police commission's fault. It's the Board of Supervisors' fault. Only if I had it's the bureaucracy's fault. Only if we could remove the layers of bureaucracy. If I had more power directly, I could get the job every single step of the way. And then you have stakeholders that have globbed onto that and promoted that message. The mayor appoints the majority of all commissions and oversight bodies. The mayor is the main decision maker for hiring and firing department heads. The mayor appointed the district attorney. The mayor appointed the city attorney. The mayor appointed members to the Board of Supervisors. The mayor appointed the school board. Like, there really isn't anyone else that she can point fingers at, right? But instead, they've globbed onto this. They've really dug their claws into this narrative, and they promoted this narrative. And I hate to say it. Yes, there are people that want to get in the way of progress. There's no question about that. But Mayor Brown, that's when my political history in the city began. He had a far more antagonistic Board of Supervisors in 2000. They literally were all elected, every single one of them, except for 2 or 3.
To oppose him.
To oppose him.
Right.
Every one of them.
Because he was seen as so powerful.
Because he had appointed and he called the Board of Supervisors his mistresses. Like, he dismissed them as being irrelevant. And there was this massive backlash.
And how did he manage to get things done? He was known as a wheeler and dealer. He was known as very powerful, influential. What did you learn from watching him?
Mayor Brown, regardless of what, like you said, you could have this public fight. He'd be having dinner with you that night saying, let's sit down, let's talk. What is it that we can do? How can we get to yes? I can't give you this, but maybe I can give you that. Ask Supervisor Peskin. I mean, he's negotiated with Mayor Brown for 24 years. And it's the difference. It's the difference between being a real hands-on mayor. When I started with Mayor Brown, this is one of the things that I will bring back. And I promised him this when I told him I was running.
Is this the office hours on Saturdays once a month? And he was famous for doing
open door day. He would open up the international room. He'd have his phone.
Wasn't it like the top 10 people who sign up or something?
The first 10 to 20 people, they would get 10 minutes with Mayor Brown. He'd have his phone on the table. He'd have staff in there, chief of staff. Every department head in the city knew that day. Because he didn't know the issue what it was going to be ultimately.
That they're going to get a phone call from him based on...
You better answer your phone. And if you don't, you better be ready to bring in your resignation letter on Monday. That's how he ran the city. Issues big and small. That ferry building was revitalized because of Mayor Brown. So much of the waterfront was redone because of Mayor Brown. So many of the projects. So even though he had an antagonistic board, he still was able to get things done. And I think that's because of the power of the mayor's office.
Well, and of course, then Mayor Gavin Newsom, now Governor Newsom, came next. When I sort of talked to people who was like, I don't know, the last mayor that people got excited about, they kind of point to Newsom. He was different than, he was the protege of Mayor Brown, but what did he do differently that sort of made people get excited? Was it just his youthful energy, or was it something else?
It was, he was about big ideas. Literally his first month in office, he did the whole gay marriage pronouncement, opened up City Hall on Valentine's Day, lines around the corner, challenged the status quo. And I think that's what
and that was important for that issue, but also symbolic of what was coming.
What was to come. That was set the tone for his administration. This is how we are going to be. We are going to challenge. He did the Stem Cell Research Center. He did what was called, and I wrote him this memo when I was on his campaign. It was called How We Can Reform and Revitalize Public Housing, which ended up being named Hope SF. And they've come in, and we're seeing that's 20 years in the making. It's still undergoing, where they took all of the major public housing, government subsidized housing, building mixed income communities, rebuilding places that hadn't been revitalized. And so he was a big ideas person and wasn't scared to challenge the status quo. And I think he did a good job, again, of having the right people in place that understood labor, understood how to manage departments, brought philanthropy, the other thing that he did, and you remind me of it, he really was about public-private partnerships. People weren't really talking about that. Like today, it's kind of like, oh yeah, we know that. We'll do that.
Well,
but he really started that conversation. So when you think of like India Basin, which is going to get hundreds of millions of dollars in philanthropy, or the Tunnel Top, right? Over there in the Presidio. I mean, that's a lot of philanthropy and private money coming with government money. That wasn't really happening 20 years ago. So I think that's part of the reason why he was really about looking for big ideas. I got hired by the janitors union to work on mandatory recycling. Like at the time, it was only one stream of trash. And we're like, no, now we're going to go to 3 streams. And the reason they hired me was because they had kind of forgotten, like, oh, wait, in the private sector, there's actually people that do that work, and you're asking them now to do a lot more work. Let's think about that in a thoughtful way. And his administration embraced us on that. So he was really about big ideas. And I think that's why people got excited about it.
And you weren't in Ed Lee's administration. He was sort of the person who wasn't supposed to become mayor, who became mayor, and then he wasn't supposed to run, and then he ran. And what do you take from Ed Lee?
I worked at Public Works when he was the head of Public Works and then the city administrator, which at the time was under his purview. Ed Lee, I always like to think of Ed Lee as like, he was like the mechanic. He was the plumber. That
like the technician, because he was city administrator. He understood how all the valves work in the government.
You couldn't talk about any aspect of government that he hadn't had exposure to and been involved in. So he understood how things work. But the thing that he had, I mean, the other two did, but in a different way. Ed Lee would come in the room like we do sometimes when we're trying to build consensus around a policy, and he'd have all the stakeholders. And a lot of times the mayors will come in and give a 5-minute, thank you guys for being here. I'm going to hand it to my chief of staff and I'm gone.
Makes their cameo appearance.
Ed Lee would stay there from the beginning until every single person was gone. And people, wow, man, Ed Lee's ready to work. He's ready to put in the work. When they were doing the CPMC negotiations, when they were negotiating with the Warriors to come into Mission Bay, Ed Lee was personally engaged, made the phone calls at the table, and showed the stamina and the desire to get to yes. Even the mid-market tax break, same thing.
Do you want to change the trajectory of our city on issues like public safety, civic disorder, and government accountability? If you want change to happen now and feel that San Francisco city leadership isn't moving nearly fast enough, come join our movement. Learn more at wesanfrancisco.org/join.
And what would you say? We know your feelings on Mayor Breed, or you wouldn't be running, but what has she done well? Can you point to anything that you think she did a good job on that you would give her kudos on?
You know, I like the fact that she embraced this conversation about internships for kids that don't have those opportunities. Because many times doors are open, whether it's for education or employment or general opportunities in life. It's about your relationships. And so being able to say, I'm going to expand this opportunity for underrepresented groups, a lot of them African-American, Latino, Pacific Islander. I'm going to make sure that they have internships and they have opportunities in places that they might not otherwise. It's something that I've tried to do in every opportunity that I have. When we work with the janitors, we try to get janitors to get opportunities working in some of the companies and the tech companies or whatever businesses had, really trying to open up doors. And so I think she's done that well. I think it's a really important legacy of her administration. But
what is your relationship with Mayor Breed now, since running? What is the status of it?
I mean, listen, I've known her for 24 years. I think she's put a lot of hard work into being a strong voice for her community. I think that's really important. And I always try to be professional and cordial.
I think you said before you were getting the silent treatment for a while. Are you still getting the silent treatment?
Yeah. She won't speak to me. She won't even acknowledge me publicly. Like, there'll be supervisors there, there'll be elected officials there. She won't say my name publicly.
Okay, well, but isn't there things you have to like work on with her? Because I mean, you're a candidate, but you're also on the board. You have to talk.
I've tried. One in particular that's super important to me is we had commitment from the library commission, and the mayor to build a library. We have the smallest neighborhood library in Ocean View, 9,000 square feet. It was a temporary library built by Mayor Willie Brown. I mean, multiple classes can't go in there at the same time. It's so small, and seniors can't go in for their reading clubs because it's so small. So the intent was to go from the smallest now to the biggest. And we found a location. We had the support. We have the momentum. We have the money. We have like more than 2/3 of the money, 35 million plus sitting there. When the mayor found out that I was running for mayor, she decided to kind of redirect. It's like, let's go find another site, which is convenient to say we're not going to.
And you attributed that to like,
oh no, 100%. And so we had to actually pass legislation just last week to say, you must prioritize 100 Orizaba. That is the choice of the community. That's where money from departments has been spent. So yeah, it's unfortunate. And I even said then, I said, I would love to work with the mayor. Let's get this built. This is too important. I mean, never thought I would be fighting, going back to your knife in a phone booth analogy, never thought I would be fighting about a library for a community. I mean, that is just crazy.
And what is your opinion on, there's a lot of, it seems like every few weeks now, some kind of corruption scandal coming out. And we see it again and again. And some of it is like, a lot of it deals with building inspections because there's a lot of power there. But some of it deals with, I think the most recent one was like selling goods by the government for neighborhoods on eBay by an HR manager. It's coming out, and all of this kind of stems from really the like Mohammed Nuru, head of public works, for decades, powerful guy, well-known. And San Francisco is kind of a relatively small city. So lots of people know each other. Do you think, like, I know Mohammed Nuru was a close friend of Mayor Breed. They said like way back in the day, they dated, she accepted some car repairs for him. Is she at fault for that? Or is that just like, it's a small group of people and you know what? Everyone knows everyone and you're going to have some kind of association because there's so much corruption being exposed.
No, listen. If you've worked in this city for 25 years, if you've been ingrained, you're going to know people that have been caught up in this. But there was if someone on my staff spent $5,000 or more to repair one of my vehicles, that's a bribe. That's like, I'm doing this, I'm untouchable now. I can't be fired. Like, I'm not going to be like, that is the definition of corruption. I'm sorry. But it wasn't just in that department. I mean, it was pervasive. There's like 15 department heads and 15 departments that have been impacted by this. And then you get another layer below, as we saw, the police department, one of their biggest and most important nonprofit providers, SF Safe, was just caught up in, I mean, the district attorney's looking into the case now, where the money has disappeared. People haven't been paid. Money was misspent. And so this culture has kind of pervaded this entire administration. And it's very, very unfortunate. When I read the thing about, because the most recent one you talked about was the Community Challenge Grant. Mm-hmm. These are small neighborhood leaders that come together and say, we have a staircase, we want to add tile to it. Can we get a $5,000 grant? We are seniors, retired folks. We want to form a neighborhood emergency resistance team, NERT team. Can you get us some money so that we can buy radios and different things? This money was taken on paper. It looked like it was going to a group. And then this employee went out and was buying equipment and was selling it on eBay. That is like, it just blows my mind. It literally blows my mind. And then kickbacks going to department heads, and you got this contract, but you're going to give me 60,000 of it. I mean,
well, do you think
it sounds like Chicago in the 1920s. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
And does it feel like the tip of the iceberg to you, or no? Do you still think there's more that's going to reveal, or is it all, some of it's like low-level folks that don't have a lot of power? But obviously Mohammed Nur was not low-level. He was probably as high level as you can get within the city government. Like, do you expect more to come out, or more?
I mean, listen, the director of Fix-It team, the Community Challenge Grant person, Public Works, PUC, Building Department, Department of Environment. I mean, I could just keep going. I mean, it's pretty bad. And it's one of the reasons why I was asked the other night, and again, this comes back to the power of the mayor, which department heads would you fire? I didn't name anyone in particular, but what I said was, if you've been in that department, if you've been in that position for, I said 5 or more, really more like 8 or more years, very similar to a supervisor, controller gets a 10-year contract, city administrator
gets entrenched power. You have entrenched power from time.
Exactly. At some point, many times it ends up being one of the elements and the reason for you believe you're untouchable. This is now your fiefdom. You're no longer, I mean, the biggest example was, and again, going back to my city planning hat, they wrote this wonderful book about Bob Moses. Have you heard of Bob Moses? He had this tiny little department head. He was the head of the toll collection in New York City, right? But he literally started in the 20s and went all the way to the 1960s. He is the one that they account for and being responsible for shaping New York City. He was the ultimate power broker. Every mayor would come in and they thought they were going to get rid of him, and he would just slap the paper on the table, like, sign my reappointment right now. And all that toll collection had its own revenue. He had his own cooks, his own chef. He literally had his own fiefdom. And when you look at some of the things that happened in some of these situations, these folks were creating their own little, I'm going to get you to donate to this nonprofit so they can pay for a holiday party, so they can pay for my expenses, so they can make sure. And in this worst case, I'm going to collect a bribe. You're going to give it to my girlfriend. She's going to try to clean it and deposit it in her account. And we're going to go to Chile and wherever else and drink fine wine and stay in the. I'm like, it just blows. It is.
And to me,
it is the most. And the reason I'm so upset is it is, to me, the biggest breach of trust to the public. They put a lot of, like, I'm an elected official accountable to the people that elected me. I'm not there to enrich myself or to take advantage of or to ensure that I'm getting more. And it's just hard.
Well, but to me also, as bad as that is for the financial cost, the ethical cost, it's worse now to me because we have this crisis of confidence in our city. Where does that come from? That comes from the state of property crime. That comes from the sort of civic disorder in the city. But it also becomes like, it's one thing to be like, we have these problems, but like, we're on the case. We're going to fix it. But if you don't have confidence in the people on the case, that is a tax on any solution we might have for property crime, homelessness, violent crime, drug crisis, and all of it, we can't solve it because of that lack of confidence.
And then in its worst form, they paint a brush of everybody. Oh, you're an elected official, you're corrupt. You work in Department of Building Inspection, you're corrupt. You work in this department, you're corrupt. And there's a lot of good, hardworking people that have dedicated themselves to be public servants that now, I mean, morale drops, public works for so many. I mean, I tweeted on the way over here, thanking all the crews that have been out there for the last 24 hours, cleaning the streets and sidewalks to make sure our city's safe. They literally have worked around the clock. Those are the people, that department is the hardest working department in the entire city. And yet their department head was the kind of the figure of all the corruption that happened in the city, where it was like the pinnacle of it, right? It impacts how people feel. And that's horrible.
Hey, it's Ben Kaplan here. Want to join our movement to get San Francisco back on track? Attend a We Town Hall event or stop by our popular We Happy Hour meetups. Better yet, join our data team, take the census, or help us audit the city budget. To join the movement, text us at 415-301-6700. That's 415-301-6700. Or learn more at wesanfrancisco.org.
There was a San Francisco Chronicle article that talked about, I'm probably going to get the name wrong, but Siavash Tabazov, who was a developer in the city, did one of maybe the largest recent development in your district, and it was a good friend of yours, I think the 116 unit development. And he was, I guess, I don't know, I think the allegation is bribes to the builder's inspection. And he was, I think, at least this is the story, so you can correct if it's wrong, but it's like a good friend of yours, and also on a personal level, you developed 6 different buildings with him. And to be clear, you're not implicated.
That part's not right.
Okay, that part, you can clarify that. To be clear, you're not implicated in any of this,
No.
but you're associated with him. Do you feel like some people have sort of said guilty by association because there's lack of confidence? How has that affected you?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, this person, and so to clarify the last thing, I hired his former business partner to be the engineer to do my plans. And so that was where they were like, oh, I've never did any projects with Sia, never one.
Okay, his company partner.
But I hired his former partner to be the engineer to design my plans and stuff. And so, you know, here's a guy that did 50% affordable in my district. It's not the largest, actually. It was at the time, but now we've had one that does 200 units, one that 130 that came online, another 130. But at the time, it was the largest apartment building. He gave away 50% of the units as affordable, and then some additional units to former transitional age youth. So we celebrated that at the time. And I've known—
So you're saying he's doing good work, he has a community at heart.
Right.
So this was shocking to you?
The person that I know, and I've known him as a philanthropist. I've known the family as philanthropists, engineers, small builders. Those are the people that I knew. And so to hear about this, it was shocking, because I was like, why does he even need that? Why would he even need to be involved in that? Because he's doing all these other things. And when you get to a certain point, you're able to, you know, really understand the system better. You have the right designers. And those are the things that really facilitate the communications back and forth. So it was shocking to me. And then, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's going to be people that will say, well, he knew them, he's guilty too. And that's kind of what I was saying. It's like, there's all these good people that work in these departments, that work for these, that have dedicated themselves to it. My reason for being a public servant is to help people, not to help myself by any means. I've always operated myself with the highest level of integrity and honesty. And as you said, there's no implication, and there won't be, because I'm 100% not involved in any of that. But it's unfortunate, because it just shows how widespread it is, you know, how many people will be touched. And I think there are still going to be more people that will be implicated and more people that will be involved. I don't think the district attorney and the U.S. attorney is done. As you asked me the question earlier, I think there's more to come. I was shocked the other day when I saw the guy that was selling the computer. I was like, what the hell? This guy works in HR. What's he doing?
Do you think San Francisco is systemically corrupt? The San Francisco city government, is it systemically corrupt? Like, not just some isolated bad apples, but the system itself. Do you agree or not?
I don't know about the system itself. I think that there definitely have been some people that have gotten into these positions and then at some point saw other people doing things and are like, oh, this is the way we operate business. This is one of the first times this is going deep, and it's finding people in every aspect of wherever they were involved. And, people send text messages, they put things online, and they create a paper trail of the crimes that they're involved in. And so I don't think it's a systemic level of corruption. I don't think the nature, but I will say, going back to building and going back to some of these other areas, because of the level of delays or the level of review and bureaucracy.
Just if it's slow, it gives it a place for corruption to fester, right?
And then you have these
accelerators
who literally have these frontline people that have these literally one-on-one interactions, and they're like, hey, well, I'm here. I don't know. That looks a little wobbly. Oh, then that cord, that should be 2 inches this way. Sorry. And it can be death by 1,000 cuts. And then they're like, or I don't know, I really wish I had a new watch or whatever it is. And they start to insinuate. And then it creates this environment because things are so slow. The bureaucracy is so laden with all these additional hurdles that
it gives
the system itself, it creates an environment where people can take advantage of that. And that's unfortunate. It's really, really unfortunate.
Well, and the issue is that if you create 15 hurdles to getting something done, let's say to get your permit or your license, each of those little hurdles might be a low-level person, a relatively low-level frontline worker who doesn't normally have that much influence or power in the process, but you have to jump over 15 hurdles to get there. Each one of those hurdles is actually a potential for you're going to get slowed down. I can speed you up. And so there's so many opportunities.
But in those situations, it's incumbent upon, and I've had many, many contractors come to me and say, you know what? Even if someone insinuated, that's just not how I do business. And if it takes a little bit more time, I'll try to get a new inspector. They just won't be involved in it. It's not unique to San Francisco in terms of corruption within building departments. I think that's something that's been documented very extensively all over the world.
Well, and not even building departments too, but it's like any slowdown bureaucracy. It's like New York, members of the police force, because it took a long time to get a gun license, were, taking money to accelerate gun licenses. And in LA, it takes a long time to get a liquor license. So those who have control over that process can sell to, your karaoke bar, you can speed up. So that's why I just wonder, we've got to fix, I think most people feel like the bureaucracy needs to be fixed, but there's many reasons to do it. One is just serve the people. Let's serve our city. Let's change our community. But the other is let's not give a place for corruption to hide if we can improve this.
Absolutely. I think that in and of itself is an important statement. I think we need to facilitate that to ensure that it doesn't breed that level of corruption.
Do you have a special skill that you'd love to contribute back to the city we all love? We're looking for volunteers with skills in diverse areas like photography, videography, social media, data science, and accounting. Find out how much fun it can be to change San Francisco's future at wesanfrancisco.org/volunteer.
A couple things about your campaign, and I'd love to hear you comment on other campaigns too. One, when people talk about your campaign, some of the discussion or maybe a critique will be that they feel like they don't know, and these are just talking points that were set to me, so maybe this is from other campaigns. They don't know where you stand on things because they feel like, oh, you're moderate in some instances, but then, there's kind of an open lane on the progressive side because no one's really declared as a candidate. So you might be more progressive to a different audience, or they just don't know where you're coming from. Is that fair, or is that unfair by your other campaigns?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to look at my track record. If you look at from my initial quote, when people are like, are you progressive or moderate? I said, I don't identify. I am progressive on the issues. I am someone that's going to fight for positive change in the city, but I'm also going to be very pragmatic. And I think there are some people that for them, it's easy to kind of put someone in one group or the other. But I think I've been very clear. If you look at my track record on how I voted, I think it builds a body of evidence. I think it's easier when you haven't been elected and you haven't had to take the tough stands and you haven't had to take a position, it's easy.
You're talking about Daniel Lurie or someone like, okay.
Someone like Daniel Lurie or an outsider, it's easy to say, this is what I believe. These are the solutions. This is what I'm going to do. But how do you know? Where's the track record of evidence? I can point to homelessness oversight and accountability because I ran that ballot measure and those audits and accountability have begun. I can point to passing foot patrols and mandatory foot patrol for all supervisorial, all district stations. I can talk about the organized retail theft working group. I can talk about my positions on different ballot, I can.
So you have a body of work, regardless of what you say.
Well, not even what I say. I mean, I think I'm very clear on where I stand on things. I've never avoided any questions. I don't avoid any direct issues. But, there's instances that have come over the last few years where if I feel something is important to go one way, I will go that way. And I think that's probably more of my pragmatism, to be honest with you.
Or so we're saying like a nuance on an issue that might warrant it. Talk about Proposition B. You're the sponsor behind it now, but it has sort of an interesting history in that it was originally put forth by Supervisor Matt Dorsey, and it was to increase staffing levels of the police. He's been on the podcast before, and he kind of considers if you came in and had an amendment and sort of made it predicated on a future tax revenue event that would fund it.
Future funding, yeah.
For a future funding event. He considered that, he called it, I think in his words, a poison pill, that you were sort of sabotaging his legislation and that it was kind of all politics and it has the opposite effect of staffing police. It reduces police because it's going to delay us to get this future funding. What is is that fair, not fair? People,
no.
The other side calls it a cop tax.
Is it a cop
tax?
No. So I guess the best analogy I can say is, you see Governor Newsom's doing Prop I. Prop I is going to an existing tax and saying, let's reallocate some of that. Let's open it up for more uses so we can repurpose it in the right way. So it says any Californian that makes over $1 million a year in income will pay a tax. That tax will be used for mental health services. What Governor Newsom now is saying, going back to the voters with Prop I to say, some of the categories and some of the ways that money is being used is too restrictive. I want to open it up so we can build more mental health facilities. I want to use it so we can get more housing for those with mental health and addiction. We're doing the exact same thing. And the problem with what Matt was proposing, and I told him this in advance, I went into his committee, I talked to him on the record because we can't talk outside because we're on the same committee. We are facing an $800 million deficit and growing. If you come in and say, without an identified source, we're going to set aside, in worst economy, 18, 17 million. In normal economy, 30 million for the next, you literally are robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so just this past month, the mayor came in and said, all the funds that you've negotiated this past year for multiple projects, we're taking that back. Again, power of the mayor. $75 million worth of programs were immediately cut. Guess what got cut in my district? After school programs, food pantry programs for seniors, childcare. All of those things are super, super important for families to survive and thrive in the city. Why would you want to put a recruitment bonus, a hiring bonus for police and recruitment funds for police and pit them against these services? That's the worst idea in the world. And it would literally engender more animosity and anger toward police and the police department. So what I said was exactly what Governor Newsom said. Let's go back to an existing tax and let's ensure that we're funding this in the right way so we're not shorting our upcoming budget and services that we need. That was it. And so we are going to, there's no tax. There's this whole idea of a cop tax, stupid. It's great marketing, right? It's great. But there's no tax in the measure in Prop B. It says we're going to reestablish the minimum staffing. We're going to do that over 5 years. But we're going to ensure, like Governor Newsom is now, we're going to ensure we have the right funding source. This idea delays hiring. There's 300 funded unfilled positions in the police department's budget right now. What they need to do is we need to get the mayor, who's ignored recruitment in the police department's budget. It's only been $250,000 for the last 5 years. We need to increase that in this upcoming budget in a thoughtful way. And then when we go back and identify the funding source so we can ensure that we can do this aggressiveness, we need to make sure it's done in the right way so there's an actual funding source. I mean, that's all we did. And we even offered, again, going back to this divisive conversation, we said, let's all sit down, let's negotiate, let's work with labor, let's work with the stakeholders, let's come together. But again, forces that are out there that want to divide and create this wedge in the city on such an important issue, so they chose to go a different direction. It's unfortunate.
Well, and it seems like to be so divisive on that issue. I mean, I think there's general feeling like we need to staff up the police.
No, there's no question.
This is important. We can agree, and like, if anything, we should be uniting on. It's something like that. So the fact that it's turned into this bitter battle is really unfortunate.
It was 1,950 officers when London Breed came into office. There's 1,560 today. An independent analysis and audit says there should be 2,150. So we're about 500 to 600 officers short. Okay, I don't think anyone's debating that. 300 funded unfilled positions, which gives us enough money to go ahead and get that going. I just couldn't in good conscience say, I'm going to cut food pantry, senior programs, after school programs, all of these things that are part of our social safety net, which was exactly what would have happened.
Final thing before we get to our lightning round and wrap up, I just want to ask you is this whole, I think the most divisive issue we've had recently is actually one that probably doesn't impact the city directly at all, but it's very symbolic, which is basically the resolution on the Israel-Hamas war, the extended ceasefire. It was an 8-3 vote in terms of supporting that. You voted for it. And I just wonder about that because this is, I mean, it's an important topic, but what impact does San Francisco have on this in the world? Probably not a lot. Yet it was so divisive that it sort of seemed like, is our ladder up against the right wall? Did you feel that way? Or do you feel, no, this is such an important issue that we have to take a stand?
No, because I'll tell you why. When I first heard about it, my initial reaction was, wow, are we really going to dive into this debate? Right? Well, you said, is San Francisco going to have an influence? But again, my job as an elected is to listen to people. And that's what I did over the course of the month. It happened to be during the holiday season. And so, I mean, I've never gotten more outreach and contact over any issue my entire time being an elected official. And these were people calling up and saying, on both sides, I had people from the Jewish community calling up and saying, any conversation that elevates this is going to create more fear and hatred toward our community. And let me give you some examples of what happened. And then I said, we had Kill the Jews spray painted near our child care center in our synagogue. We had members being spit at. We had members being, when I say members of their church or their temple. And we've had businesses. On the other side, I had people that are San Franciscans saying, I lost 40 members of my family this month in the bombing. I've had my grandparents' graves bombed. I've had family members arrested that I can't even get in contact with. So this is not it is a far off conflict, but it has direct impact to the daily lives of so many of the individuals that were involved. And so it was hard at that point then to say, well, we can't be involved. And it was going down the path of what are we then going to say in this moment in time when this is happening? And so we were working up until the last minute to amend it, to just basically pare it down to say, let's respect life, humanity. Let's stop. There's some impediments on both sides in terms of what would happen after a ceasefire happens. And so I have to tell you, and again, I said this when I got up and spoke, as someone that was born into my earliest memories are gunshots in the streets and religious extremists coming in and people threatening and killing my own family. I had family members that were killed and we had to flee for our own safety and life because it was no longer a place to be. That now has spread. It's really the religious extremists on both sides that are winning, right? So that's why I think in the end we decided to ultimately say we have a ceasefire. And I think this is not something that's unique to San Francisco. Now Chicago passed one, other places around the country. And I do believe it's forced the president of the United States to have to listen a little differently than this.
It's just, I think obviously there's tragedy in an entire situation, but it's also like, hey, we've got tragedy, down here in the Tenderloin. We've got people dying every day from fentanyl. And we can improve that. We can do something about that today. And if this gets in the way of that, are we doing a disservice to our community?
I will tell you, I think if it didn't pass and it was removed, I think that might have happened. I think we would have had a consistent flow of people coming up again and again and again as this has continued, saying, you all need to take a stand. You all need to take a stand. And so I think we tried to pick something that I'm sure people were angry on both sides. They would have liked to have seen either nothing, or they would have liked to see stronger language, or they were, and so we tried to do our best. But I don't ever buy the argument that why are you involved in this and you can't be involved in that. Like
you feel like we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right. I mean, I think it's our responsibility, but I do agree with the premise. Should we be spending a lot of our time involved in things that are not persistent to that are not germane to the city? But again, I would say when you have people that live in the city that have immediate impact to their lives, it's hard to ignore. And so I think we had to stand up for humanity in the end.
Want to join our movement to get San Francisco back on track? Attend a We Town Hall event or stop by our popular We Happy Hour meetups. Better yet, join our data team, take the census, or help us audit the city budget. To join the movement, text us at 415-301-6700. That's 415-301-6700. Or learn more at wesanfrancisco.org.
All right, lightning round. You've been a good sport. Let's do some quick questions. One, just because it's an area I know of special interest to you, labor negotiation this summer. What would be the first thing you do if you were, obviously you're not mayor this year, but if it had been you, what would you do as like day one for that negotiation?
I would have already had the labor leaders in the room with me and my team, and we would be setting weekly meetings to get a negotiation and a deal done. The mayor is not directly involved. This is a historic moment in the city with the type of deficit we have, the amount of contracts that are up, and the shortfall that we're facing. It requires the mayor's direct involvement. I would be directly involved at the table with my team.
And even now, not waiting for
right now.
Yeah.
I would, a month ago.
Yeah.
It started a couple weeks. I would have been I would have called them before the break. They've known this is coming. They've known this iceberg is coming toward the city. So,
okay. Daniel Lurie, competitor of yours for mayor, made news recently because of these big billboards. I don't know if you've seen them in the city.
I haven't seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen one yet. Where it's a political action committee, a PAC supporting him. Where it's $1 million. It actually has a disclosure on $1 million from his mom.
That I knew.
That you knew. Are you concerned about just a lot of resources, a lot of money coming in, affecting this race? How do you view Daniel Lurie?
So when his mom gave $1 million, I tweeted out, I said, my mom gave $150. I said, love you, Mom. People power are going to drive this campaign.
And was that match 6-1? Where is she? Is she here? So it's match 6-1. So, okay, you got to match that. Okay, good.
Yeah. So it's like $1,000 donation, right? When we actually get the public financing. But the point being that money's not going to determine the outcome of this race. It will not. San Franciscans are smarter than that. They're not going to let someone come in and buy the mayor's office.
Do you think Daniel Lurie would have a chance of being a good mayor?
I like Daniel. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's dedicated. I think he's bright. I think he is personable. I think he will have challenges because of his lack of understanding the stakeholders and knowing how to kind of put those coalitions together. But I think he's a really smart guy, and I think he's a good guy, and I think his heart is in the right place for the most part.
Okay. Mark Farrell, a lot of discussion about him because he was mayor, kind of acting mayor for 6 months, was on the Board of Supervisors, a venture capitalist. What is your perspective on Mark Farrell?
I think at the end of the day, listen, there's going to be other people that will get in. It's a democracy. You know what? It is not an easy road to become mayor. This is not an appointment. You're not becoming the interim mayor. You got to go out and fight for it. You got to go out and convince the voters of San Francisco that you're the one. And I will say, this city has been in crisis for the last 5 years. You have to be in the crisis to understand how to get us out of the crisis. And it's easy to watch from the sidelines. It's easy to be doing your own thing and then come back and say, oh, I want to run for mayor now. So God bless. It's democracy. We'll see what happens.
Aaron Peskin, president of the Board of Supervisors, a lot of speculation on him jumping into the race because there hasn't been sort of on the more left side of the political spectrum enter the race. Would Aaron Peskin be a good mayor? Would he, do you think?
Again, that would be up for the voters of San Francisco to decide if he got in. Aaron is somebody, he understands how government works. He understands the legislative process. He's actually someone that's willing to negotiate and work with folks. And I've had a tremendous time working with him on the Board of Supervisors.
And final parts I just want to ask you about is if we lived in an alternate universe where Mark Leno, who was the runner-up to Mayor Breed back in 2018, and it actually was a lot close because of ranked choice voting. A lot of those Jane Kimmon votes who were number 3 really put him very close. If he had won that election, how would things be different now? Do you think it would be different? It would be the same if we hadn't have had London Breed as mayor?
I definitely believe Mark is a consensus builder. When I went back to going back to the story I told you about going for an 11-0 vote on inclusionary housing, Supervisor Leno was the person at the time that led the legislation on inclusionary housing. When I saw him when I first got elected, he said, Ahsha, my best advice for you is go for an 11-0 vote. So Mark is about trying to build consensus, trying to bring people together. And so I think in that regard, it would have been absolutely different.
All right, hobbies. What do you do to blow off steam, or is this all consuming? Do you not blow off steam? What do you, aside from, I know you spend time with your family, your wife. Besides that, what else do you do?
No, my biggest hobbies are playing sports with my kids. I love it. My son's playing flag football. He does baseball almost year round. My daughter is in soccer and cross country and tennis. And
so you're on the sidelines cheering as a lot of your time if you're not.
They are. I am, but also just with them one-on-one when I can. You know, I'm out there playing tennis with my daughter or playing, baseball with my son or football with both of them. They both love to play football. So that's a lot of what we do. As much as I can, but right now there's not a lot of free time to do hobby type things for sure.
What is something surprising about you that people would just not expect to know about you, your background, your interests, how you think about things? What's surprising about you?
I think probably that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I always kind of it's self-reflecting. I probably would think, one time we were at Stern Grove and we were at Diggable Planets concert and I knew all the words and like Hillary Rowan looks over and she's like, wow, like I didn't know you liked hip hop. So I grew up listening to hip hop. That's my thing.
Would there be a performance if you're elected mayor at your party? Will there be a hip hop performance? Are you going to commit to that now if you're elected?
Maybe a gospel hip hop blend.
You're gonna do, okay, there you heard Ahsha Safai. He said he's going to do a gospel.
Not me. I'll have a group. What do you mean?
Oh,
me?
You.
Oh,
you
no.
go after. No, there's not going to be a performance.
No performance from me.
Okay. What is the best meal in San Francisco under $20? Do you have a go-to spot? Anything you want to recommend?
I love El Farolito. I love La Taqueria. Like for me, although I don't know, man, their burritos and prices have climbed to maybe over $20.
Okay.
But my favorite spot in the Mission is La Taqueria. For sure.
Which is good. I'm a fan. I've been recommending this to people. I think a couple of times now on the podcast, but I like it so much. Tommy's Mexican on Geary. I know you spend much time at Tommy's.
Yeah.
Have a bit of a margarita. Have some, I recommend the chicken enchiladas there.
There you go.
What's a hidden gem in San Francisco that you think is under the radar? Just something to check out. You got relatives coming to town that aren't here much, or I don't know, you got a new constituent says, I'm new to town. Where do you tell them to go?
But I don't know if it's a hidden gem. I don't know if anyone is fully appreciated and seen. I talked a little bit about the Tunnel Top. We were there this past weekend with the family. I have to say, I'm trying to think of an urban area that's done something similar to that, but taking a freeway that was open and connecting the Presidio to Crissy Field in the way that they did it, and building in food and building in, play structure for the kids and families, and then going into to me is one of the most beautiful gems. But the other one that I've been fighting for recently that I think is a lot of time overlooked and kind of taken for granted, but they're like, wow, this is amazing, is the Marina Green and Marina Harbor. You have swimmers, rowers, people that are learning to sail, and then you have all the area, just a beautiful scenery and the environment there to me is super, super amazing.
Well, I agree with you on that one. My wife, who's here in the background, is an open water swimmer, a member of the Dolphin Club. And that's why even just, I don't know, the recent news about the attack on the person who was there at 6 a.m. just trying to get a workout in. And it was sort of attacked in the hospital. It just shows you how, hey, we take this hidden gem.
And by the way, I was meant to be there if it hadn't been for the rain, because I've been working so hard with those folks to protect and save the Marina Harbor for swimmers, rowers, and sailors and others that just enjoy the marine and green. I think Rec and Park's proposal would have just destroyed that area for all of the above. And so we're working to kind of shape that project. We passed legislation to that. We're going to vote on it tomorrow, essentially. So all the Marina Harbor folks. But I had been invited down there the same day that the person was attacked. But we postponed it because I wasn't 100% in the rain, and so we just said we'll reschedule it for this week. And I saw it was just horrible.
It is shocking for someone that's like enjoying the beauty of the city. It's a great use of our city, but I think the good news is that at least the last post I saw was that it seems like he's doing okay in the hospital. There's a GoFundMe which is funded, so if you want to support that, check that out. Final question for you. You've been an awesome sport, Ahsha. Is let's say you are, before this campaign is over, you are mayor for a day. So you can't fix every problem. It's just a day. You have no commission oversight. You have no.
Wait, what happened? Did I win the election? I only get it for one day? Or
no.
I get a trial run.
You get a trial run. There's somehow a charter amendment that says every candidate
has to be
day,
mayor.
and you can't build 3,000 units of housing in one day. So you can't do that. But you have unlimited ability to do what you want on this day. What do you do for that day, your day as mayor, and you can do one thing, you can get it done?
I'm going to dive in really hard on the overdose crisis. We've been fighting this conversation about creating overdose prevention centers. It's been politicized. There was a commitment from the mayor to do it, and she's backed away and said, our hands are tied, the federal government. If I can wave a magic wand for one day, I'm opening up a really well thought out overdose prevention center, similar to what they had in Harlem, where we can start turning back the clock on 806 people fatally overdosing in San Francisco.
All right. Well, there you have it. Ahsha Safai, candidate for mayor, member of the Board of Supervisors for District 11. Thank you so much for your insights and best wishes on the campaign. And it's going to be an exciting one and a challenging one, but hopefully San Francisco will be better for it.
Thank you, man.
Okay. Cheers.
All right.
Okay.
This was brought to you by Top Thought Leader. Find out more at topthoughtleader.com.